So let's dive into a really challenging, but I think incredibly important book, Negative Dialectics by Theodor Adorno. He asks us to think about a pretty radical idea. What if our very way of thinking is actually doing a kind of violence to the world we're trying so hard to understand?
And that question gets right to the core of it all. Is the very act of thinking, of forming concepts, a form of violence? Now, I know that sounds extreme, but for Adorno, it was one of the most urgent questions philosophy could possibly ask, and we're about to find out exactly why.
Okay, so before we can really wrap our heads around Adorno's negative dialectics, we first have to understand the traditional positive version he was arguing against. We've got to build a foundation first. You know, for centuries, the whole point of dialectical thinking was to find order in the messiness of the world. The idea was that thought could take on conflicts, smooth out contradictions, and arrive at some kind of higher, cleaner truth. It was all about tidying up reality into these neat, understandable packages. And this is the classic model, right? The Hegelian one you might have learned about. It's a process of progress. You start with an idea, that's your thesis. Then it gets challenged by its opposite, the antithesis. And out of that conflict, a new, better, more complete idea emerges, the synthesis. And this cycle just keeps repeating, always moving up towards a more perfect understanding of everything. The end goal is always a happy, positive resolution. But then Adorno comes along. He looks at this neat, tidy process, and he sees a profound, profound problem. He argued that this obsession with a clean synthesis, this need to make all the contradictions go away, wasn't just a philosophical mistake. It was actually dangerous. He had a name for it: identity thinking. Adorno's whole critique really starts with this simple but massive observation. The second you think about anything, a tree, another person, an idea like justice, you are identifying it. You're slapping a label on it, fitting it into a conceptual box you already have in your mind. For him, that is the most basic thing that thought does. And here's where the problem really comes into focus. On the left, you've got the actual object out there in the world. It's messy, it's unique, it's got its own specific history. And then on the right, you have our concept of it, which is clean, general, and totally consistent. When we think chair, we aren't thinking about this one specific chair with its little scratches and wobbly leg. We're thinking about a general idea of chairness, and that creates a huge gap between reality and our idea of it. So what gets lost in that gap? Adorno gives it a name: the non-identical. The non-identical is all the stuff that our concepts just can't grab. It's that specific wobbly leg, the unique history, the particularity that gets, sort of bulldozed over when we force a thing into a neat category. It's the leftover stuff, the part that doesn't fit. And for Adorno, this is where the violence of thinking really begins. So if traditional dialectics is all about trying to erase that leftover remainder, what's Adorno's alternative? Well, he proposes something completely different: negative dialectics. First things first, and this is absolutely critical, negative dialectics is not another philosophical system. Adorno was not trying to build a better, more perfect box to put everything in. In fact, he called his own work an anti-system. It doesn't give you easy answers or a nice, tidy place for your thoughts to rest. Instead, you have to think of negative dialectics as a practice. It's an ongoing activity. It's about using our concepts, the very tools that make the boxes, to relentlessly chip away at those same boxes. It's about using your own thinking to expose the limits of your thinking. This is Adorno's own definition, and it is just perfect. It's not about finding some final capital T truth. It's about maintaining a consistent consciousness, staying constantly aware of everything our concepts miss, everything they distort, and everything they leave out. It's about laser focusing on that remainder, the non-identical. So the whole goal just flips on its head. Instead of trying to force the object fit our concept, you use the concept to shine a spotlight on how it fails to fit the object. You don't try to get rid of the tension between the general idea and the specific thing. No, you live in that tension. You preserve it. Because for Adorno, that tension is where truth actually is. So right about now, you might be thinking, okay, this is a fascinating philosophical puzzle, but so what? What does any of this have to do with the real world? Well, for Adorno, the answer is everything. This isn't just about how we think about chairs, it's about how we've built our entire society. Adorno argues that this logic of identity thinking, forcing unique things into general categories, has become the basic operating system for modern life.
He called it the administrated world, a world where everything and everyone gets categorized, measured, managed, and processed. And here, the parallel becomes just chillingly clear. In our minds, we have identity thinking. In society, we have the exchange principle, where everything's real, unique value gets boiled down to a price tag. Just like a concept erases what's unique about an object, our social and economic systems can reduce unique people to interchangeable statistics, to cogs in a machine. And what's left out? The non-identical becomes real human suffering, the specific individual pain that the system simply cannot see or process. And this is why it matters so much. For Adorno, the highest purpose of philosophy, of real thinking, is to pay attention to that suffering, to give a voice to the non-identical, to the specific pain that the big abstract systems just ignore. This is the ethical heart of his entire project. Truth isn't found in some perfect, harmonious system. It's found by recognizing what that system crushes. So, is this all just doom and gloom, a philosophy of endless negativity? Not at all. And this is the final, and I think really beautiful turn in Adorno's thought. There is a deep, powerful hope hidden inside all this negativity. The point of all this constant critique isn't just to tear everything down for the fun of it. He's not a nihilist. The negative in negative dialectics is a tool. It's not the final destination. You see, the hope is found in the refusal to accept a fake, easy answer. By constantly pointing out the contradictions, by insisting on the reality of suffering, by showing the gap between our ideals and our reality, by doing all that, we refuse to let the way things are now be the final word. This relentless negativity is actually what protects the small glimmer of utopia, the possibility of a world that is genuinely different, a world that doesn't run on domination. And this quote, this captures the ultimate dream. The goal isn't to get rid of concepts. We can't. We need them to think. The dream is to learn how to use them differently, to use our thinking to actually touch the real, messy, non-identical world without crushing it, without forcing it to be the same as our ideas about it. It's a hope for a kinder, more truthful way of knowing. So Adorno's work really leaves us with this challenge. If our obsession with building these perfect, all-encompassing systems is actually a dangerous illusion, then where do we find truth? Maybe, just maybe, we can learn to find it not in the tidy, finished puzzle, but in the messy fragments, in the contradictions, in the suffering, in all the pieces that don't quite fit. And that's the question at the very heart of negative dialectics.